Welcome, Soundies, to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 17th of October, 2021. I'm going to bet he's not watching, but I'd like to offer my brother, Corey, a happy birthday. But I don't think he ever watches these shows. I don't think he cares about, he's not a soundie. Although he is becoming a drummer, he says. So welcome to our session. Let's go take a look at our agenda today and get started here. So first up, we're going to take first of all, I need to put that in presentation mode. There we go. We're going to take a look at some microphone sanitizing products from a company called ViolaWave, and it uses both UV and ozone to clean microphones. So we'll take a look at those. Izotope RX9. I was hoping to get a chance to work with RX9 a little bit more than I did this week. We are going to cover what features are new, and then in subsequent Sound for Video sessions and perhaps overall, so on my main channel, we'll do some demonstrations of the new features in RX9. So we'll come to that. Rode sent over a new cover for their Rodecaster Pro. We'll take a look at that for just a second, and then we'll jump into the questions that were submitted ahead of time. And we have those in our agenda here, and then we'll go back over to the chat and answer any questions you have there. So let's go ahead and jump in. First up, we'll take a look at these sanitizers here. So obviously, when you are working now in production sound, you need to keep your microphones clean. And this company here appears to have made products that I think initially were aimed at, for example, live music venues and things like that, but they have some things that are interesting for all of us as well. So let me just show you. So this is obviously a silicone kind of pouch where the microphone itself fits. And then on the top here, there is a little USB rechargeable cover. And what the cover does is it has a button here that allows you to turn on the ozone generation and the UV that comes out here. Obviously, we don't want to look at that directly while it's on. So what it does is it creates UV light, I believe it's UVC light, and also ozone to sanitize the microphone. So between the two of those, they claim that it will manage 99.9% of microbes. And you can see here it has a little USB micro connector. Also comes with a cable to get those charged up or to power it. You can power it directly from USB if you need to do that. So here, for example, the nice thing about it too, I should say, is that the silicone rolls up, so it's nice and small for transport if you need to do that. Also, let's just do a little something here. Let's pop in a Shure SM58. Kind of what a lot of live music venues will have microphones like that. Then it's just a matter of you press the button, and then for 5 minutes, you just let that sit there and do its thing. So we'll let that run. They also have a smaller one. This one's interesting because I'm not necessarily a fan of the metaphors of using weapons of destruction, but the product itself looks pretty useful. So this smaller version here can be used for things like in-ear monitors, or for if they're going to be shared especially, or for things like lavalier microphones. So here we have a Shure Duraplex. We'll just pop that in there, and same thing there. Once you get it in, you just pop it on, turn that upside down, and in 5 minutes we should be on our way. So let me just show you some of the things here over on their website. Whoops, that's not what I intended to show. My apologies. There we go. This is what I wanted up here. So let me just kind of run through what it does. Our sterilizing system uses a powerful combination of UVC and ozone. Ozone is generated in small quantities to preserve the integrity of the treated objects. And thanks to its gaseous nature, it also sterilizes the areas that are not normally reached by the UV light. UV port allows you to charge the built-in battery just 30 minutes or use it as an external power input. The body of the products is made of a special silicone formula, elastic, foldable, portable, ideal for activities such as conferences, TV, radio, live performances, recording, karaoke parties, religious events, etc. Unlike conventional spray disinfectants, ViolaWave's products do not need to be refilled. And then there is also they worked with a university in Italy, it looks like, to do some testing, and they did in fact confirm that it was killing more than 99% of the the microbes that were in there. You can take a look at that if you're interested in the details. In terms of pricing, I haven't found a U.S. dealer yet. It was the U.S. Representative that actually sent me these, but over on their website, they have various places around the world that carry them. But here, for example, the pricing in the UK for the smaller one here called the Grenade is £59.95 pounds inclusive of VAT. And then the larger one, £69.95 pounds inclusive of VAT. So look like pretty interesting products, and a pretty timely type of thing too for the world that we live in now. And I think it's always actually been important to do this. In fact, having watched some, or having talked with some people that manage live venues, they've been taking, for example, their Shure SM58, the grill. They've been taking those off and actually sticking them in dishwashers for years. I don't know how they get the foam inside there to dry, because you wouldn't want that to get all moldy either, but this seems like it would solve that problem. So kind of an interesting set of products there. All right. Good. I think that's everything on that, unless anyone has any questions on that. We do have a question, it looks like, from Greg. I'm wondering how the UV light will affect my cables, shorten the cable life. Great question. Same with the ozone. Ozone can be degrading as well. I think it's a trade-off. Obviously, we have to sanitize things just, to keep things safe for the people that will be using our products or our microphones. But there's always, over time, it is going to degrade things. So I don't know how quickly it's going to degrade them. I would say ask me again in a year, and we'll see if any of my stuff is... I'll use these over that time, and we'll see if any of my stuff degrades over that time. So it's a fine question there, Greg. Good. Okay. I think what we'll do is we'll move on now to... Actually, while I'm on the overhead camera, I'm going to switch things up here a little bit. Let's go ahead and I'm going to turn those off for now. Okay. I want to show something. Rode sent this over. Okay, let's go to the overhead cam. All right. Rode's evidently now makes an acrylic cover for the Rodecaster Pro. So being acrylic, it'll obviously get scratched up over time, but if you just need to keep the dust off of your Rodecaster, probably a good way to do that. I haven't seen the pricing on this yet. I would expect it to be fairly affordable. I would guess $20, hopefully, or less. Just so you're aware. So that's an option there for sure. And then I think I've shown this before some time ago. Sorry, I'm off mic there. A company called Deck Saver, which makes covers for a whole bunch of different mixers and DJ equipment. They make one. They're based in the UK. They make one for the Rodecaster as well. This one is made of a different material. It's a tougher material, so it's going to be a lot more expensive. And as I recall, I think these are like $60 US. I'll need to go back and check the pricing on these. But these are more of a, not only keep the dust out, but also if you're worried about things getting really banged around, these will probably hold up a little bit longer. So a couple options out there for the Rodecaster owners among us if you are interested. Okay, that's good for that one. Get that out of the way. Okay, let's go take a look at RX. Now, RX is, obviously we've talked a lot about RX. I use RX regularly, and they have a new version that just came out, version 9. A couple of things that I want to point out just quickly. Where is it here? I think they're running a special on Elements. So if you don't have Elements already and you're interested, if you come to the Izotope site, let me just come over. I'm going to open this in a new tab here. They had some deals here, even for Advanced. Advanced is now less expensive than usual. I know that's a big price tag for those of us that are just doing this for fun, but that's significantly less than the normal $1,200 price. Standard version is running $300 right now, and then I believe the Elements is $29. Yeah, $29 for the Elements. So this is, if you're curious what each of them has, over here on the products page, go to RX. Where was it? It's under features. Well, there used to be, they changed the site. Oh, here it is, compare editions. So if you want to see what is included in the Elements versus the standard versus the advanced version, this will run through all of that for you. All right, let's go back and talk about what's new in RX and what I'm most excited about. First up, here it is. What's new in RX? So first of all is a new algorithm for the dialogue isolate. This is one of the, when I'm actually mixing a short film, this is one of the most useful modules in RX from my point of view. It does an amazing job of isolating the actual dialogue from any sort of ambience, and it allows you to dial in exactly how much ambience you want to keep. It's great if you're cutting between microphones with different perspectives so that you can kind of match them up in terms of the room tone versus the dialogue. And it just works super, super well. I am excited to try it. I can't imagine how much better it could possibly be because it was already really good. But looking forward to doing that. So we'll do a demonstration of that one as well. Looks like they have a new mode for the dehum module. And in this particular case, it looks like instead of identifying the specific frequencies, you let it work in a dynamic sort of fashion, and it identifies where that hum is. So that'll be interesting to work with as well. I have found in some cases, especially when you have multiple hums going at the same time, the dehum module can be a little bit difficult to work with, or just a chore trying to find, where the fundamentals are for each of those hums, and then, applying the harmonics to that. But this one, it looks like, can do that in some respects automatically. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. All right. In ambient match, there are some new tools here as well. This is another thing that can be really, really useful for those situations where, again, you may have different perspectives from different microphones and you need to get those working, or maybe you don't have a lot of room tone that was recorded during the production to work with. This will help you to work that together. Also, if you are ever working on things where you have dialogue replacement audio that was recorded in the studio after the fact, being able to mix that in is quite a bit of work. But what this does is it allows you to match that up, to bring in the same ambiance that you got in the production audio. So you get a really, it's kind of a seamless cut. And here it actually gives some samples of the difference between RX8 and RX9, just so you can hear the difference there. There are some workflow things as well. It looks like History got a couple of different things that are available here. I'm not entirely sure what this restore selection means. I know you've always been able to roll back to a specific point. I'm not sure why that's being touted as a new feature, but I'll have to look into that in more detail. You can now actually run the spectral editor directly in Logic Pro, which is interesting for those that are mixing in Logic Pro. And then finally, you have an expandable history pane, so you can see a much kind of deeper history and be able to move back and forth within that. So it looks like up to 30 of the last audio steps, which is wow. It's holding on to a lot of stuff. So that's kind of an overview of what's new in Izotope RX9. So as I said, we'll be taking a closer look over the coming weeks here and digging into the individual new modules and demonstrating how each of those work. Any questions on Izotope? Let's see what we've got here. First up from Linda, for someone who has never used RX, is it worth trying at the $29 level? It really depends on what you're doing. So if you're doing mostly production sound, maybe not. Definitely at $29, it seems like a steal to me. It's in the $29 version. Let's see here. Let's go back to where it was showing the differences between them. You get basically a series of plugins, plus you get the Izotope RX audio editor. You get I know you get the denoise. I think you get the DS. I need to find the feature set again. It's going to take us over to the Explore features. Where was that? There is here, pricing options, compare editions. Here it is. Okay. So you get the declick module. So that's taking care of any clicks. That's actually the one that I typically use for getting rid of clicks. Like, for example, if someone starts a sentence or they get a tongue click or a lip smack or something like that, I'll often use that. Declip, if your audio ever clips, you can actually restore some of that. And it's actually synthesizing it. It's not restoring it so much as synthesizing it and recreating it. There is, of course, the denoiser. There are also some other tools here. You can bring in other third-party plugins. There's fade, gain. The really useful ones are things like phase are available. Obviously, the normalize. The adaptive phase rotation, super, super helpful for aligning asymmetric waveforms and reclaiming lost headroom. So I would say, yeah, $29 is definitely worth trying. It's kind of a different beast from the advanced version and even the standard versions have a lot more tools. But nevertheless, if you're not like a hardcore post person, I think the Elements is a great way to get into it, personally. So good question, Linda. Thanks for that. Homesick Mac, I've got Elements, and it's a great product, worth more than its price. I absolutely agree, and I think its normal price is $100 and some, so $29 is quite a steal. And I think just in terms of pure value, absolutely worth $29. Ambient Match is great, especially for outside work. Thanks for that, Graham. Yeah, it's when you're mixing films and or even videos where you're working outside and have to match different mics, especially. That can be really, really helpful. So, okay, we good there? All right, let's jump into our question and answer session then. First up, we have a video question from our friend Clayton, and I'm going to need just a second here to cue that up here. Let's see, over to our media players. And I need to unmute him so that we'll be able to hear him. Okay, this is, we have kind of a funky setup, so that's why we are back and forth on this. Give me just a second here. Okay.
Hey Curtis, and hello Soundies out there in Sound World. I had a quick question, and it is like what scissors or what sort of cutting utensil you have in your kit. I got these because they fold up, and honestly, you really kind of don't need, or I find that I don't really need. I don't really use these all that much. Oftentimes I can tear whatever I need with my fingers for when I'm applying lavalier microphones. But when these scissors became unimpressive, it was during the time that I needed to apply Joe's sticky stuff. So I'm curious what weapon of choice you use to do the precision cutting, because there is a video on the DD microphones, the DD microphones gentleman, I can't remember his name, but there's one where he's using like razor snips, but for the life of me I could not even find where to get those. I think part of the issue is not even knowing how to refer to them or what to even call them. But anyway, that's just a question I'm throwing out there, is what do you use to cut your tape and get those precise tape applications of the lavalier? Because when it came time for Joe's sticky stuff, these fell through, and it became a real... It was like kids' slimy toys as opposed to sophisticated application of mic. I mean, I got it done, but it was a mess. Anyway, that is my question to you, Curtis, in the community. Thank you for everything that you do, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Clayton. All right, let's go to our overhead cam here. You're going to be unimpressed probably, but I have to show it. This is what I use. Just some big scissors like that, and they fit in my kit. The thing about these is I don't, if these get really gummed up, typically what I'll do is I'll get out the Unisolve. That'll just clean it right up. So this is a specific wipe that's made for removing adhesive, and that's typically, it's actually like a medical product. It's for removing adhesive from skin, but it works nicely. I use it on my lavalier mics. And also scissors if I ever need to do that. So I'll be honest, with Joe's sticky stuff, I typically just tear it. I don't usually pull out the scissors for that. What I do use the scissors for mostly is for the moleskin, and I use quite a bit of moleskin. So Yeah, that's basically it. But I'd be curious what everyone else out there in the community is using when it comes to prepping your tapes and hiding lavaliers and wiring people up. Let us know in the chat. Thanks, Clayton. All right. Next up from Patrick, this is a longer one here. I'll read through this for you. I'm a one-man band shooting a documentary. I'm thinking about the best possible audio setup I could get in my situation. So a lav for interviews, considering a Zoom F2 plus a Sanken COS 11D. And I will get into unpredictable situations, one or multiple people talking outdoors, indoors, conversations in a car, and I may not always be able to set up the audio beforehand. So I'm thinking about an on-camera shotgun mic. Could you recommend a mic that could try to tackle these situations? Is a short shotgun a way to go, or a condenser? We'll come back to that. So actually a short shotgun is a condenser microphone. Weather resistance is a must, and small size would be great too. At the moment, I'm thinking of Zoom H5 plus an NTG5. MKE 600 is also interesting since it can be phantom powered by battery and could be useful for gimbal shots connected directly to the camera, but then it's not weather resistant and fairly big. Other typical on-camera mics like NTG4 Plus or Video Mic Pro sound pretty amateur to my ears, so I'm aiming for something better. So first of all, a couple things. With the Zoom F2, be careful with that. The COS 11D, I think, requires a little bit more voltage than the F2 supplies. I know it probably will work initially, but you don't want to undervolt your electronics when you can avoid it. It can actually damage them. So you might want to look for a different combination there. I'm not sure. The problem with the Zoom F2 is that it supplies 2.5 volts, I think, which is not, depends on the microphone you're using. But just keep that in mind when you're looking for microphones, because it does supply a little bit less voltage than other products do. Okay, so things I would look at depending on what your price range is. Look at the Voice Technologies VT500. Look at the Shure Duraplex. We'll have a review on that here in the next few weeks. We're still waiting for I'm waiting for Shure to send me one more thing to make that review. Deity, VLAV, or no, not VLAV, the WLAV Pro, those series, I did a review of those a while back, so you'll want to just check the specs on those to see what kind of voltage they require to find one that works for you. Those are the first ones that come to mind, so those are things to consider. As far as microphones for the camera, the S-Mic 2S from Deity is an option. It is a short shotgun microphone. The problem I had with that one is that it's fairly, the noise floor, the self noise that it produces is a little bit higher than I would typically want. That's the only thing I didn't like about that microphone. You might look at the NTG. Yeah, the NTG5 is fine. I think I haven't had any issues with mine, but I have seen a decent number of people complain that they've had technical issues with theirs, where they're getting all sorts of weird, what sounds like interference, but it may or may not be. What I would recommend is, for any microphone with the NTG5A, make sure, I think a lot of these people actually have one of two problems. Number one, they plug it in right away and listen right away, and it does make some strange noise at first until it settles once it's been powered up by the phantom power. So you do need to get it powered up and let it settle for a couple of minutes, and then it's fine. Number two, I think a lot of them are using maybe not the best cables, and it's not a perfect fit. So if you're not getting a good solid fit with the XLR connector into the microphone, that's another potential issue that I think some people are running up against. So that's my take on that. But yeah, the NTG5 to me seems like a really good option for that particular scenario. So hopefully that helps. Again, if anyone in the chat has other suggestions of other microphones to look at, love to hear those as well. All right. Next up from Leo, have you used the Sennheiser Ambio 3D VR microphone? The samples I've heard online are great. A far cry from stereo. Any thoughts? Leo, I have one sitting out here ready to go, but we have not had an opportunity to use it yet. But I will definitely talk about it once we have had that opportunity. We are looking for opportunities to get out where I can take that and set it up and get some nice recordings out in nature somewhere. So stand by. We'll have some more info on that here before too much longer. Next up from Cameron, I've recently been setting up my Rodecaster Pro. The monitor speaker outputs on the back take 2 1/4-inch pins If I want to feed these into my monitor speakers or feed them into my ATEM mini mic input, I need a cable that has 2 1/4-inch pins on the end and a 3.5 millimeter TRS stereo pin on the other. My question is, should the 1/4-inch pins going into the Rodecaster be TS or TRS pins? The reason I ask is because I notice on the huge instruction cards that come with the Rodecaster box that the monitor speaker outputs are balanced. I looked in the holes and they seem to have 3 contacts for a TRS pin. I generally understand the principle of balanced lines, and the benefit is that they can run long distance whilst avoiding RF, but how does that work in this case? How does a balanced line at one end convert to an unbalanced line at the other end of a cable? All right, this is actually it's a simple question. Unfortunately, it's not a super simple answer to answer the exact question you asked, but I do have a simpler answer. For the particular case of the Rodecaster and the ATEM, I have a specific video that I produced. I identified the exact cable that I used to interconnect the two of them, so you'll find that in the description below. So in the description, link to that video answers all those questions. For the broader question, the answer is it depends. And it's a more complex, it's a little bit more complex than I would like, but the reality is there's different ways of doing balanced audio that different manufacturers use. So let me just pull up a couple things here in my browser here. So we'll switch on over here. So Sound on Sound has a couple of articles. I have linked both of these down below as well, which I recommend going to have a look at. One is, how is impedance balancing audio different from normal balancing? Very much worth the effort of reading so you'll understand how balanced audio works. And then there's another one called Audio Cables and Wiring, and here they run through the difference between balanced and unbalanced cables. They also have a question farther down that you're going to want to look at. Can I use an unbalanced signal with a phantom-powered mic input? What's the best way to connect unbalanced signal sources to balanced inputs? So lots of good information. We won't dive into it here, but again, there are links for both of these articles down below. So I would definitely recommend taking a look at those. So thanks for the question, Cameron. All right, so if you want to learn more, if you want to learn just how to connect your ATEM Mini and Rodecaster, we have a video for that. Next up from Andrew, a question. Incidentally, this is kind of the theme for this week. Andrew has a similar question, a question on the topic of getting balanced inputs into cameras, specifically getting audio from a mixing board into the Panasonic GH5. First thing, Andrew, that we probably need to clarify is that there is a difference between the GH5 and the GH5S. They both take unbalanced inputs. The GH5, the original, only takes microphone level, whereas the GH5S can take microphone or line level. So very important to make that distinction in case you are working with the GH5S. That could solve part of your problem here. Andrew says, I do have the DMW XLR1 audio attachment for the GH5, and I'm currently using that successfully to take the line outs from a Yamaha MG10XU mixer interface to the camera during Zoom calls. A great way to monitor my audio in real time during the calls while receiving audio out from the computer via USB. So for those that aren't familiar, the DMW XLR1 is an audio interface basically for the GH5 cameras. So it gives you 2 XLR inputs into your GH5. Andrew continues, I need to create a setup in another room with another GH5 with a Behringer XR12 digital mixer Focusrite 2i2 combo, and I'm looking at ways to get the dual XLR balanced outs of the mixer direct to the 3.5 millimeter input of the camera. And I'm thinking an Art Cleanbox Pro would be a good option for converting a dual XLR balanced stereo mix to unbalanced 3.5 millimeter TRS that I can plug direct into the camera. Will this product work, and is there anything better I could consider for this job and other potential uses? Well, first of all, Andrew, a couple of things. So you need to do 2 conversions, basically. You need to convert from balanced to unbalanced, and number 2, you need to convert, if you're using an original GH5, not the GH5S, you also need to convert from line level down to microphone level. Now, you could use the tape, perhaps a tape out on a mixer if those mixers have them. I'm not familiar and intimately familiar with those particular mixers, but if you do have a tape out, you could potentially use that. Let me just show you here the product that Andrew was talking about. If we could switch to the Mac here. This is the Art Clean Box Pro. It's basically a two-way DI box, so you can plug in two balanced outputs from a mixer here, and then on the output side over here, you have an unbalanced output, so a minus 10 dBV output that you could then run into the GH5. The problem is, again, if you're getting a line level signal from the mixing board, this takes care of taking the balanced signal and converting it to unbalanced, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't convert the levels down from line level to microphone level, so you still need to solve that problem. So if you did go with this, you would still need a line attenuator, basically, to something in the minus 35 dB range to bring the levels from the mixer down to something that the camera could handle. So that's the thing to keep in mind there. So it's up to you how you want to solve that problem. To be honest, the XLR1, while I know it used to be $400 US, I don't know if it still is, but in what it would be in the Australian market, but that's probably the simplest solution because it's taking care of both of those problems for you. This Art Clean Box Pro only takes care of one of the problems. So that's just the thing to keep in mind there, Andrew. Hopefully that answers your question and gets you where you need to go. All right, next up from Michael, how do you eliminate the sound of someone breathing in? Now that I noticed it, I find it quite annoying on my recordings. So it's definitely there on mine as well. The main thing I do is I use Izotope RX D-Breath module. Or is that what it's called? Let's actually pull that up. Izotope RX9 audio editor. Wow, we're going to pull up in version 9 here, and it is called actually breath control. And breath control is actually pretty straightforward to use. I wish we could zoom in a little bit on that, but basically what you do is you set its sensitivity, and then you tell it how much you want to reduce the sound. So for example, I often set it to reduce the sound by maybe about 6 dB, roughly. You can also do it to a target level. So if you want it to be, you want the breaths to sit at minus 40 dB or something like that, you could do that as well, just whichever way you prefer to work. Here I typically do about 6 dB of attenuation. What I typically do is I actually check this box here to output the breaths only while I'm in preview mode, listening through to an audio recording. And then I adjust the sensitivity so that it captures the breaths, but it doesn't capture stuff that is not breaths. So it's just a simple process of going through, listening, and tweaking the sensitivity until it gets the breaths, but doesn't get a bunch of other stuff as well with it. Once you've done that, you uncheck this and you can render it, and then you'll get a sense to see how it works. So that's typically what I use for breaths. Now, you can do it manually, of course. You can go through, highlight each individual breath, and just gain them down. But what I would be very, very careful of, if we go back to the question here, one thing that Michael says, and I don't think you necessarily meant this technically, but just to kind of give you my personal philosophy, your question is, how do you eliminate the sound of someone breathing in? I don't think you want to eliminate it. Humans breathe, and it actually sounds quite unnatural if you would completely eliminate their breaths. I think you just want to make them less distracting, and especially so after you've done some compression or loudness normalization to spoken word audio. A lot of times those breaths get a little bit more emphasized. So using something like the breath control plugin in Izotope does a nice job of reducing it without completely crushing it or cutting it out or eliminating it, which then again, as I mentioned, starts to sound pretty unnatural. So those are some thoughts on that one. Etienne has a question. Imagine you're booming a scene indoor. Very often your choice will be a hypercardioid microphone or a supercardioid, especially if you can bring it close enough to the talents, medium to close-up shots. But let's assume some parts of the scene are only covered by a wider shot, full shot or wider, where the hypercardioid will be too far from the actors and pick up a lot of the reverberation of the room. Certainly the sound will be coherent with the perspective of the shot, but it will be suboptimal. For this particular shot, do you exchange the hypercardioid or supercardioid for a more directional one, a shotgun microphone, even if it means doing some EQ and post to match the sounds from both microphones, which can be from different brands? That's one way to do it, Etienne. I think another way is you can actually have the boom mic, if you have arrangements already made with whoever's running the production, whether it's you or somebody else, you can do some compositing. So you can actually keep the boom mic in the frame. You'll shoot a, what's it called now? It's where you shoot the frame without the person in it, so that you can mask it in later. So you can basically mask out the microphone, but you do have the microphone in the shot recording while you're there. So that's another way to do it. It's a plate. You shoot a plate, which is basically just running 30 seconds or maybe a minute, depending, of the same scene without moving the camera at all. And then you can composite that in post and just basically mask out the microphone, and everything looks great. So you get your wide shot. You also get the perspective in particular that you're going for without a whole lot of reverberation. So that's another way to do it. Yes, using a shotgun microphone, something with a more directional polar pattern, could certainly be something you could use and then EQ it in post. Or use something like ambience match here in Izotope RX. So there's some options there. All right. Those are all the questions we had submitted ahead of time. So let's go to the chat now and see what we've got out in the chat as far as questions are concerned. Danny's going to take a look through here, see what we can find. Hope everyone's having a great, well, in those in the Northern Hemisphere, at least, in moving into autumn here. Question from Mark. What would you recommend with RX9 to reduce traffic noise on a clip I did for a client? Used MixPre 3.2 with noise assist, AVX with COS 11 on Talent. And it's a two-part. Worked great, but they made us shoot 30 feet from a 6-lane highway. I'm sorry, Mark. I'm laughing only because I've been there with you multiple times. So dialogue isolate is the first thing that would come to my mind. That's what I would try first. You can also, of course, go into spectral denoise in RX. You could go into voice denoise. Some people claim they can get better results with spectral denoise. I find voice denoise is definitely easier to use and usually a little bit quicker, but spectral denoise evidently can do a little bit better. But I actually find that dialogue isolate is just amazing, and that would be the first one I'd pull up. And especially if you're going to end up having to cut between multiple microphones for that particular take or for that particular scene, using the dialogue isolate will help you dial in the amount of ambience you want to keep, from each mic and get them sounding the same. So typically, depending on how the people were oriented relative to the noise of the traffic, sometimes the lavalier microphone can pick up less ambiance, depending, like if they have their back to the traffic, that can be really helpful. So anyway, that's how I would approach that. It's a great question. All right, from Moylan. Hi, Curtis. I saw some professionals are using a lav mic that requires phantom power with recorders that can't supply enough phantom power. How will it affect the quality of recording? For example, a Sanken COS 11D needs up to 48 volts, plus Zoom H1N supplies only 2.5 volts. Well, a couple things. So phantom power and plug-in power are different things. First of all, it's important to keep that in mind. So lavalier microphones, unless they are terminated with an XLR connector, usually require plug-in power. Somewhere between 3 and 5 volts is the standard or typical. Obviously, again, the Zoom F2 it supplies 2.5 volts, and it sounds like, I don't know if, I'm not particularly familiar with what the H1N supplies, but you're saying 2.5 volts. So the Sanken COS 11, if you look on the spec page, I know it will say up to 48 volts. That's for the XLR version. I don't think that the version that is terminated with 3.5 millimeter or any of the other terminations for wireless kits, those are not meant for, those don't require 48 volts. Those require something less than that, probably somewhere between 3 and 5. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. So you need to be very particular about which one you're talking about. And so with the, I think the bigger risk here is that you don't want to undervolt your microphones. That's going to be, well, obviously you don't want to overvolt. You don't want to send 48 volts to a microphone that's expecting 5 volts, for example. But undervolting can also be very dangerous for your microphone. So just be aware of that as well. I think in, anyway, those are some thoughts there. I don't know. I don't know if I've answered the question. I hope I did, but those are some things to consider. Okay, from Ben's Tech Lab. Have you previously viewed any of the Behringer X-Air lineup? I'm curious how good the dynamics and EQ are versus a more hardware approach with a DBX 286S and DBX 131S EQ as an insert. My application being YouTuber live streaming, want a bit of an expander, compressor, and EQ for room acoustics. Oh, more. Oh, that's back to the first one. Okay. I have not used the Behringer X line. I don't know, have you seen Lloyd in the chat today? Lloyd has some experience with those. Anyone else have experience with those and can speak to the Behringer X Air lineup? I don't have personal experience with those. For live, I really like the DBX 286. The reason I like it is that it's actually an analog compressor. So it works really, really well. I'm actually quite happy with it. I actually have been using it. This last week, I used it all week for my Zoom calls for work. So I have my Rode NT1 going into the DBX 286, and that comes out into my Apollo Solo audio interface, and that goes into the Zoom calls on the computer. So personally, I would do that. I would imagine that the X Air are all digital processing. So all that means is, in practical terms, you may have a little bit less headroom. You can't necessarily drive the preamp like this the same way that you would on an analog unit. So that's the main difference there. But I've been really super happy with the 286S. It's really quite nice to work with. And if anyone knows anything more about the X Air, love to hear about it. Homesick Mac, any tips on connecting a Tascam DR70D line out to ATEM Mini Pro input? I run 2 or 3 Octava MK012s to the Tascam, not happy with the results. What are the results? What are the things that you're not happy with? Be curious to know about that. The DR70D should have a line output. I think it's either switchable or there's a little dial to control the output. You're going to want to look in the manual and make sure that you're feeding it line out and that the ATEM Mini's input is set to line input. Those are the first thoughts I have, but I'm curious. I'm assuming you're getting some hiss or some sort of self noise in the signal. So that would be the first thing I'd check. I don't have a 70D on hand to actually test it with an ATEM, but that would be the approach I would take. Greg, any thoughts on sound devices being purchased by Audiotonics? No thoughts yet, Greg. Hopefully they get to continue to operate with a focus on what they do great, without being pushed in a direction they don't want to go or their customers don't want to go. So that's all so far. We'll have to watch and see. Darren, do you have any, do you have any experience or thoughts on Steinberg's spectral layers application? I watched an interesting demo on its upcoming version. Darren, I do not, just because I haven't used it yet. So spectral layers is something that I have on my to-do list. When I get a chance to take a look at it, we'll definitely be sharing our thoughts on that. But looks like a pretty interesting app. Lots of applications for filmmakers. Hiss, self-noise, but that maybe has to do with the input gain on the ATEM mini variables. Yeah, if you switch it to line level on the ATEM and then set the gain to 0, I would start there. If you're still getting hiss there, maybe check your cables, especially if you're running long cables between the two. You want to use high-quality cables. That's going to be an unbalanced connection, so you could pick up RF. You could pick up, more likely, I would think, actually electromagnetic interference, which will have a buzzing sound in many cases. Keep the cables away from any AC adapters in particular, but any power cables as well. Those are all things you can do to help manage those types of issues. All right, Polyrhythm. Hi from Belgium. I'm most productive at night, but if my girlfriend is asleep or in the apartment at all, she can hear everything, sound recording. Is there anything I can do to at least diminish this? Well, so I don't know what you're recording. Are you recording with your online name, Polyrhythm? I don't know if you're recording instruments. Instruments are generally louder than human voice, spoken word. Sound blankets can help a little bit. They'll at least cut some of the high frequencies. They won't necessarily cut the lower frequencies. But with human voice, typically that doesn't carry quite as much. This is an important question. We're trying to save a relationship here. Obviously, if you could invest in something like this, these are they're actually broadband traps. These are from GIK Acoustics. But they're European companies that make a similar thing. These will cut more of the bass as well as the high frequencies, and you can get them on stands. So these are not these two here at least are not attached to the wall. They're just on stands. Oh yeah, and there are also vocal booths that you might consider. Again, regardless of whether you're doing instruments or spoken word, GIK Acoustics and several others. What? We have a goofy question. We have they make basically these kind of bifold things that you can buy that are basically bass traps in a bifold that you can move around and take them down when you don't need them. So that's another option that can help with that a little bit as well. So those are some thoughts.
Okay, just a shout out to the super chats.
We got some super chats. Rob, thank you so much for the coffee and tea fund level up. I appreciate that. Thank you, Michael V, for your question. Had a question about shotgun microphones. So we actually already put that in the chat at the start of the show. Homesick Mac, thank you. Thank you for the great show, and also thank you for the questions. Very much appreciate that. All right, Just Voice. I tried isolating the door with tape, but I looked at panels Indeed, but they cost so much. Might be worth investing, though. Yeah, I think, unfortunately, tape won't do a whole lot. Sound waves have a tendency to travel, especially the lower frequencies will go through walls and things like that. So fortunately, it's voice, so it's not like you're playing bass through an amp. That would be harder. But voice, yeah, I think, take a look at the different things that are available in terms of acoustic treatment. I would go with something more like this. It's a broadband trap as opposed to just foam. Foam will cut the higher frequencies, but not the lowers. So, and it's the lower frequencies that have a tendency to carry through doors and windows and walls and stuff. So, Moylan, what is the best audio software to learn if I know none of them? For example, in video, now many creators are switching from Premiere to DaVinci. What about the audio world? I think a lot of people are switching to DaVinci for that too, for those that are on a tighter budget and don't want to lay out a lot of money. At the higher end of the market, Pro Tools is still very much, what is used in feature films and things of that nature. Oh, there's a phone call. And then we're going to try and take care of that here real quick. So as far as other apps, I used to recommend, you could take a look at Audacity. But Audacity was recently purchased. I don't know how this works. It was an open source app, and then it was purchased by a company. So I don't really know what's going on there. So give us just a second here. We need to solve a little bit of an audio problem. Okay, let me just keep going here. So I think DaVinci Resolve is probably one of the best ones to consider. So I would head that direction. That'd probably be my first recommendation. Audacity, I don't understand the new business model and what they're doing with that. It seemed like in the legalese, there was some weird stuff about they could use your content, which was a little weird. So I would be a little bit careful with that, or just look into it in more detail if you're concerned about that. But I would say DaVinci Resolve and its Fairlight panel is probably the thing that's probably, if you really want to dive into sound for video, that's probably the best one that doesn't cost anything. I use mostly Adobe Audition and Izotope RX. Izotope RX is not a DAW, just to be 100% clear. But I do a lot of my audio processing there, actually, for the individual clips. And then as far as mixing, I do that in Adobe Audition for the most part. So those are some thoughts there on that particular question. So thanks for that, Moylan. Apologies for the interruption there. We had a little emergency we had to take care of. Hi, Curtis. I'm looking to get my first timecode products. I'm looking at Tentacle Sync E, but also the Ambient Nano Locket. I'm wondering what you use and why. I typically use the Tentacle Sync E's, but there are other options out there on the market. It's going to come down to personal preference at some point. The nice thing about the Ambience is they're super tough. Those are metal-bodied devices. You push a button, it rejams all of them. You don't need an app on your phone. You set them up before you go to the shoot to the correct frame rate. And then you push a button to get all of them jammed and then connect them up to the various cameras or recorders, and you're on your way. So that's one approach. And as I said before, super tough build quality. Tentacle Sync E's, on the other hand, what's really nice about them is that you use an app to control them. The nice thing about having an app is that you can check the battery status remotely on all of them. You can also push a button to rejam all of them. So at any time you can rejam them, even between takes. That makes it a little easier. For example, if you notice, and the app will tell you whether or not one has drifted from the others. So that's helpful as well. So that's what I typically use, and they've been really good. If you are going to do that workflow where you want to be able to rejam them, you should also have one for your recorder, even if your recorder has an inbuilt timecode generator, because if you want all of them to rejam, you need to have a Tentacle Sync E connected to your recorder as well, because that's the only way you can wirelessly rejam that. So for example, if you had a Mix Pre 2 series, you'd still want a Tentacle Sync E for the recorder as well for that particular workflow, just so you could do a one-button push on an app to rejam everything. So those are some of my thoughts. Also I should say the Tentacles, plastic bodied, so I haven't broken any, but if you dropped them, they could break. They've been pretty tough. I've dropped them before and haven't had any issues yet. Greg says, regarding deliverables, do you just provide ISO tracks or ISO plus mixed tracks as separate files, or single poly files combined mixed and ISO tracks? It depends on the situation. I have found for the lower budget stuff that I work on, which is typically the case, a lot of times they don't even know what a mix is. Like they don't have a post audio mixer. They just have a video editor, and the video editor gets, in many cases, very confused. Even if I send a sound report and very clearly say, track 1 is mixed left, track 2 is mixed right, track 3 is, boom microphone, track 4 is wireless 1, so on and so forth, or even give talent or actor names or whatever. They just miss. And I've seen some of the finished pieces and just gone, ugh, there was great audio there, but they left the mix and the ISOs all in one thing and used all of them, and they were out of phase, and it sounded pretty horrible. So in those cases, I actually just deliver ISOs in a polywave file these days, and I give them a sound report and let them go from there. So they usually can figure that out pretty well. In those cases, sending a mix, they just don't even get it. And usually I'm operating solo on sound, so I don't, if I'm booming at the same time by hand, I can't really do a proper mix anyway. So that's usually how I approach that, Greg. But it's a great question, and I'd be curious to know what you do as well. And I think it depends on the situation. Okay, a couple more shout outs. Daniel, thanks so much for the super chat, and thanks. Danny chose this shirt. So nice shirt, Danny. Thank you. Moylan, thanks so much for the super chat. We very much appreciate that. All right, do we have any more questions out there?
I think so.
We do. Okay, Danny's looking for some more.
Well, here's another one.
Here's one from Polyrhythm. Oh, this is a reply to Polyrhythm. Reaper is not very expensive, and the functionality is many times more. I don't know what that was. Looks like there's a conversation going back and forth. But yes, Reaper is another great option out there. The only hesitation I would have with Reaper, and maybe this has changed since I last looked at it, but I don't know if it has some of the features. If you are doing sound for picture, going back and forth between nonlinear editors and DAWs can be a little bit of work. You just want to make sure you're all solid on that front as well.
And then related.
DaVinci Resolve and RX work well together. Completely agree. Definitely. They play nicely. So the round trip process is actually better than I thought it would be when I checked that. All right. That's all the questions for today. that's everything. Okay. Oh, nope. Danny says she found another one from Michael. Which version of Izotope RX would you recommend for dialogue editing? Elements, Standard, Advanced? Well, it depends on what level you're working. If you're doing a YouTube channel, for example, I'd start with Elements. You can also upgrade. When you do upgrade and you've already purchased Elements, for example, the upgrade cost is a little bit lower for the other versions. So it's definitely worth going with the Elements version. I think I've even heard some people talk about, yeah, definitely buy Elements because you can save money in the long run upgrading to the others. So yeah, I would start with Elements and see how that gets you. And it really depends, again, what you're trying to do for dialogue editing. I mean, if you're doing serious dialogue editing on feature length films, probably Standard. You're probably going to end up on Standard at some point if you're really trying to, do a really great job on the mixing, and as maybe even Advanced. But again, it depends what you're getting paid. Are they paying for the tools for you? If they're paying for the tools, definitely go Advanced. Then you can provide the best you possibly could right out of the gate. But if you don't have any experience with those tools, I think Elements is a great place to start as well. And it actually probably makes sense to go Elements just to get your chops working really well on those tools, the dialogue, denoise, and those. And then, as you find that there are other problems that you're not able to solve with those, then going up to the Standard and Advanced versions makes sense from there. So that's my thought on that. Okay. Greg says, I just deliver ISO, but recently doing more posts of other people's work, getting stuff with mixed tracks, I asked myself why. Just makes more work for me to remove. Well, it depends on especially if they're not doing anything with those mixed tracks, if they're just leaving the faders all at 0 and just going. I mean, I don't know what the purpose of the mix track is at that point, but I agree. If you're going to do a mix track, do something with it. Do something useful. And a lot of times, what I just use the mix to send a feed for the wireless headphone, so it's generally going to be just the boom microphone in most cases. And if we're going to do a take or a particular shot where we're not using the boom microphone, then I'll adjust the mix and send whichever lavaliers need to go to it instead. So that's how I generally approach it. But yeah, you need to add value. If you're going to send a mix, make it a mix that's worth something to the post team. Make it something that if there's only going to be a video editor and no post mixer, that they could use the mix right out of the box, and go to the ISOs if they had to later on. That's my philosophy on it. So it's a good point, Greg. Polyrhythm, what about the sound noise in regards to my girlfriend? One more thing. Anything I can do to the wall that is shared? So desk where I am to bedroom. Well, I mean, if you can get inside the wall, you could put some rock wool in there, and that would prevent the transfer of sound. But I'm assuming that the doing that is not an option. And that's where something like this comes in play instead. So what you want to do is you want to absorb that sound before it goes through the walls. So the main thing is absorbing it and using something like these absorptive sound panels, especially broadband style panels. A lot of times they call them bass traps, which is kind of a lot of times it's used in a way that's not very helpful, because technically a bass trap like this is actually a broadband trap. What makes it a bass trap is that it captures and absorbs more bass than a sound blanket or foam would. So that's the main thing you need to understand there. If you want to learn about acoustics, one person although he doesn't talk a lot about soundproofing, he talks more about acoustic treatment, which is a different thing, two different things. Jesco, Jesco, he has a channel on YouTube where he talks all about acoustic treatment all the time. So he might have some insight for you as well. But I'm going to guess he's going to say something like this as well. Linda, I just want to say thank you because you provide information for us at every level. Thank you, Linda. I very much appreciate that. And thanks for joining us on the Sound for Video sessions here. We've seen you over the last several weeks and really appreciate having you here. So thanks for coming. All right, I think we need to wrap it up for today. Thanks, everybody, for coming to our Sound for video session. Get out there and make some great sound this week, and we'll talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.
Reason for